Hi everyone, Dom Famularo back again, the Artist Series at a distance. And the distance brings us together individually with these great musicians, and also allows you to have access to wherever you are on your device to listen to this great advice today. Dave, I got to tell you something. You know, as a professional musician who has produced your own albums and performed with an insane array of artists, then as an entrepreneur on what you're doing, then as a humanitarian, then as a radio host, you've got a lot going on. So I want everyone to please welcome Mr. David KOZ.
Very nice to see you, Dom. Thank you very much for having me on the sessions. It's an honor, and it's exciting that if anybody's watching, there might be two people watching because they're Dave KOZ fans. Most of them are related to me. I welcome you as well.
Well, this is fantastic. And Dave, you know, you really, you balance all of this. And in the music industry now, where many years ago when I was younger, we just wanted to play. Then it got into educational stuff. Then it got into writing books and things. So you've seemed to have widened what you've done systematically. So just let's go back to the beginning. What got you kind of involved in music, and when did that professional music, bug hit you?
Well, I never thought in a million years that I would be doing this professionally. I picked up the saxophone when I was 13. It was the third instrument that I tried. I started out on piano, and I hated piano because my parents forced it down our throats, my brother and sister and I. And then I rebelled and picked up the drums and was even worse on the drums. I was a terrible drummer. And I remember the drum teacher, my dad picked me up from my drum lesson, and the drum teacher told my dad, and I was right there, he said, it's not going to happen for your son with the drums. You might want to think about sports or something, because it ain't going to be music. And so I was crushed. The thing that I grew up, my older brother had this band that was doing weddings and bar mitzvahs and fraternity parties and stuff like that. And I just got it in my head that I wanted to be in that band. Of course, it was my older brother's band. And that's not going to happen when you have an older brother. They're not going to let his kid brother come in, especially since I didn't play an instrument. But then really I was going into seventh grade, and my brother kind of just like hinted that they didn't have a saxophone player and that I should take up the saxophone in beginning winds in the seventh grade, as opposed to taking music history. And that's just what I heard. And it was a time, by the way, in the 80s, or this was the 70s actually, where pretty much saxophone solos were ubiquitous in pop music. You had to have a saxophone player. So I took that and ran with it. But it was actually interesting because the sax was the first instrument that really felt natural in my hands. Like it really was a match. And often I will tell people, young people and older people, that they're interested in music, if the first instrument that you try doesn't feel right or doesn't match you, then try another instrument because it may come down the line, which was the case for me. And then I just drove my brother crazy until, as a younger brother can do, until he finally said, when I was 15 years old, he let me do one gig. It was a wedding in Woodland Hills, California, very close to where we were living in Tarzana in the Valley. And I got paid $10, and that was the beginning of my professional career. But I never thought that I would be making records. It was just not in my purview to think about that as a career. I had planned to go to college and get a job and do something else, but never was music. And it was really people along the way that saw something in me that I didn't know was even there. And those people who we all have, no matter what we do in life, we all have like the bumpers, the people that, like a pinball game, if you remember those, people that kind of, there's the flippers, and you put your ball up into play, and then there are the bumpers and the other things that kind of keep you and going in places that you didn't even know were possible for you. And that's how this whole thing happened, and nobody's more surprised than me.
It almost becomes sometimes when you talk about pinball, it's unpredictable where that ball is going to hit to the next bumper. So in your life, it seems like it kind of was that way, because you started playing and it kind of widened out pretty quickly, didn't it, after college?
Well, I graduated, I was a mass communications major at college at UCLA. And I remember my graduation, come from a Jewish family, so there's like expectations on the kids. And I know my dad and mom, who've been gone for many years now, but I remember them, they were so sweet at my graduation. They were like looking at me and going, "You got anything? You got any prospects?" And I had no prospects, no job lined up, no nothing. And I made a deal with them. I said, I'm just going to try music for 6 months and see what happens. And if I can't make it happen in 6 months, then I'll go find a job somewhere. And 2 weeks after I graduated, I got a call from one of the guys that would go on to change my life. And that was the singer named Bobby Caldwell, who was putting together a band of musicians to kind of have his comeback. He took a chance on a young saxophone player. I auditioned for the band and I got the gig. And that was a pivotal moment for me. Things changed very quickly after that.
So you get the call for the gig. Did you start going on the road, or were you playing locally? How did that start out?
It was mostly local, but because Bobby at the time, this was a huge comeback for him. He had been gone for a while, and there was a lot of interest in the Los Angeles music scene about him and what he would do. There was a club, it's no longer there, in Santa Monica called At My Place. And this was the place on the weekends that pretty much, if you were not working, musicians and artists and music business people would hang out there. It was hot. So my first gig with Bobby was a Friday night, 2 shows sold out at My Place. And I was a nervous wreck. And every song had a saxophone solo. And the first show, this is a true story, the first show, I'm just kind of playing it meekly because I don't know what to do. I'm not a performer. I play the saxophone. I'm just trying to cover my gig. And I can tell that Bobby is a little perturbed during the first show. And after the first show finishes, it was a successful show, he says, "I need to talk to you," rather sternly. And he pulls me into a hallway and he says, "What are you doing, man?" And I was like, "What?" And I thought, okay, this is great. I'm going to get fired on my first gig. And he said, "I'm moving out of the way so that you could come up to the front of the stage to take your saxophone solo. I'm like purposely giving you the stage. Why aren't you taking it? And I've done that so many times and you're not taking the bait." I said, "Well, next show, I'll be better, I promise. Be careful what you ask for," because it was like, "Get out of here, Bobby. Move over. I'm taking over." And after the second show, he said, "You might want to pull it back just a little bit."
So you had to find that balance of how to give them what they want, but also, make sure that you're playing the job as best you can. Boy, that is fantastic. Well, at that point, so you're now developing the skills of not only performing, but now the entertainment aspect of what this is about.
Well, yeah, and I think that Bobby was one of those pivot points in my life or one of the bumpers or the whatever those things are called in the pinball machine that kind of send you off to a place that you didn't even know was possible. One of the people that was in the audience that weekend was a friend of Jeff Lorber. Jeff Lorber, the incredible fusion jazz pianist, who I was a huge fan of, had all his records. And she said, "Jeff is putting together a new band. He's got a new record coming out on Warner Brothers. And I want you to meet him, and he needs to meet you." This was like a publisher that was in the audience. And I was like, great. The next thing I know, Jeff Lorber calls me. And he says, "Oh, you want to come over to the house and I want to listen to you play." So I go over to his house. This was probably 2 months after the Bobby gig. And I played for Lorber. We played together. And then he said, he didn't even say you had the gig. He said, "Yeah, man, I'm going to send you all the music. And then I also want to introduce you to my manager. And I think you should have your own record deal." And blah, blah, blah. He's like talking. It was up to that moment. I had never even thought about making my own records. And so he was one of those, the next pivot point, who I guess he saw something in me that I didn't know was there, and he helped nurture that. We put music, we wrote songs together, we produced songs together, and those demos were what got me signed to Capitol Records with Bruce Lundvall a couple years later. So it was really an amazing, just very quick 1-2 punch of people just sort of like saying, "You got to do this," and I sort of got caught up in the wave of it all. I didn't even have time to think about, well, is this really what I want to do with my life? And the next thing I knew, I was making records and putting together my own band and traveling around and doing my own career. So without those two guys and my brother Jeff, they were the primary change agents in my life, and they really, really helped me to go into an area that I can't believe I would have ever found on my own.
Well, it sounds like that 6 months deal that you had with your parents, that clarified and focused this way pretty quickly for them.
Yeah, it didn't reach the 6 months period before they said, "Oh, okay, I guess you got something going on with music."
So I guess these people, I like to call them mentors because they saw something in you that was valuable that sometimes the artist themselves does not see or is not aware of. So what do you think they saw in you that made Caldwell say, well, I want you to come up front equal on the stage with me, or I want Jeff to say, listen, we gotta get you on Capitol because this is going to work out really well with your own sound.
It's taken me many years of therapy and thinking for me to understand how it all happened. And this is a bit esoteric, Dom, so I hope you don't mind me going there. But I was a very mixed up kid growing up gay at a time when there was really no vocabulary for that.
Right.
And the saxophone, when I found it, really became like this other part of me, this vehicle for expression. Like I finally was able to get like my feeling. I didn't, have words for this or even know that it was happening. It was a very
Right.
subconscious type of thing. But the saxophone, not to be overly dramatic, but I feel like if I didn't find it, I don't know what would have happened in my life without being able to have an outlet to express myself. And I think in that, the DNA of the sound, whatever you want to call it, if you really want to tear it all down, in the DNA of the sound of my saxophone is that turmoil, that pain, that trying to figure it out. And this is universal. This is a universal thing that every human being goes through in their own way. And if you look at your favorite artists, or even the artists that you can look at and say, I may not like their music, but there's something very successful about them, and people respond to their music. I don't think any art would have any sort of resonance with anybody if there wasn't pain and trauma involved. There's something in the sound that I make on the saxophone that is identifiable. I've said this so many times since the beginning of my career. There are musicians and saxophonists that can blow circles around me. I'm not a real great technician. I'm not someone that wakes up in the morning thinking, how can I push the saxophone to new arenas? I'm just not that person. But when it is in my hands and I'm ready to play a melody, there's a lot of emotion that goes through me into that instrument and comes out the other side. I think that's probably it.
It's beautiful, Dave, because that's the power of music. That really is the power of music, where you can put these sounds into an instrument and that language reaches people and people can feel the emotion and emote from that it gives them, it makes the hair on their arms rise up. But when you play, it's just such a beautiful sound, and it's so relatable that whatever you're playing is just so comfortable. So you kind of found something. And listen, as challenged as we all are, and there's probably no one more screwed up than me in the world of music and what it comes down to. So I get it. And those obstacles that we have in life, that's really the core of who we become.
Well, I agree completely, and it's not necessarily just for musicians; it's for everybody. This is the human existence. Look what we I don't even want to say been through, what we're going through. And we were talking about this before we went into the sessions, but it's like COVID has really been something that has forced all of us. I've been flooring it in my life, like flooring it, going full speed for 35 years. Since Bobby Caldwell, since that Friday night show, doubleheader with Bobby Caldwell, I had been going absolutely full speed without taking a break. And just because this is what you do. And a lot of times it's like it was easier just to, in many ways, it's kind of like an addiction. It's like a very socially acceptable addiction to put everything into your career. It was just easy, and it was giving me a lot of support and a lot of encouragement from the outside. And it wasn't really until this moment of COVID that I sort of took my foot off the gas and realized that my career is at a place where it could have its own momentum and can go on its own. And then, what do I want as a human being to augment the life that I've created already? I wouldn't change one note of it. I wouldn't go back and change one note of it. But at this point, I'm looking to what it could be moving forward. How can I change what my life is to sort of reintegrate and bring everything that I'd sort of cast aside together and into one cohesive whole?
Well, you seem to be that kind of a wave maker that even in the course of the challenges that COVID threw at us, you still produced a couple of albums during that time and musically expressed yourself during that downtime that we've all had, but you used it positively and in a very healthy way.
Well, the COVID experience coincided with my 30th anniversary of releasing my first album, which came out in 1990. So the fall of 2020 was looming. Here we were in March of 2020, and I was thinking to myself, maybe this is a good opportunity. The bell went off in my head. Maybe this is a good opportunity to just try and put some music together and release it as part of the 30th anniversary. Not that anybody would care about my 30th anniversary other than me, maybe. But then the challenge of how do you record, how do you write songs? I'm a collaborator, by the way. I don't do things on my own. I'm not a producer. I don't do tracks myself. I don't really even know how to, I shouldn't say this publicly, but it's true. I'm not really a technological person. I don't know how to run Pro Tools really, and so I collaborate with people that help bring that side of things together, and I've really learned a lot. And I love collaborating, not just because I need somebody to operate the machinery, but really getting a chance to work with other artists, with other songwriters, with other producers, arrangers, gets me off of my little pad. If I was forced to work by myself always, I'd probably continue to do the same thing. So collaboration for me is really a wonderful chance to grow musically and creatively. So how do you write songs? How do you produce songs when you can't be together? That was a totally new thing.
Yeah.
And we just said, okay, well, I guess we got to throw things in email and ideas and send them back. And I used my phone voice recorder constantly, singing melodies and sending to the producers, and they'd send back the tracks, and then I would record my parts and send them back to them, and they'd send them out to the drummers. And the thing that was amazing in the process of making that album, which was called A New Day, everybody was available. Like you could call anybody and get them on the phone and ask them to play on it, and they'd say, "Can you send it over today, right now?" Everybody was frothing at the mouth to work, to make music, because first of all, they weren't out doing stuff, and they were home and looking for things to sink their teeth into. So we kind of pushed the envelope and stacked the deck. We said, David Sanborn. I wrote a song with David Sanborn as my ultimate saxophone hero. He was home. I said, Dave, let's write this song together. He's like, how are we going to write this song together? And I was like, well, we'll just figure out a way to do it. And we did it. And then he played on it. And then we did something with Bob James, and we did something with Brian McKnight and with Paul Jackson Jr. and all these incredible musicians that played on it. And the next thing we know, we had written 11 songs and produced 11 songs, and it came out the exact week, 30 years later, October 2020, from the October 1990 from my first album.
How beautiful, how absolutely beautiful. Listen, you took lemons and you made lemonade, lemon cake, limoncello. I mean, you really started producing your lemon meringue pie. You were really kind of producing a lot of stuff happening with those lemons.
Well, it was a really interesting thing. I hope that I never have to do that again.
Yeah.
'Cause it was challenging, but we did it. And if it weren't for people like Jeff Lorber, once again showing up for me, writing songs and producing songs, if it weren't for people like him and people like Darren Ron and Rick Braun, who produced a couple of tracks with me, my friends, great friends that we all show up for each other and continue to show up for each other. And this has been a wonderful run. Dom, you've been at this for a long time, so have I. I know that you feel grateful to be able to continue to make music after all these years, because this is a very fickle business. And so I'm incredibly grateful and honored to be able to make music and it come out and be accepted and enjoyed this many years after starting. It's pretty special.
Well, it's great to see your humility and your gratitude. That those are qualities that are just beautiful to see, and that comes out in your music, Dave. It really does. And I think that's a very, very powerful quality. The kind of person you are is the kind of artist you are. And when I hear your music, it's very, very deep. It's very emotional. It's very honest. And that's, listen, that's coming from you. That's pretty powerful. It really is.
I've never been one of these guys, just to pick up what I was talking about with the saxophone, I've never been one of these guys that ever felt the need to be a show off technologically because it's just not there, really. I mean, I can play the saxophone, I can play it well, but I'm not a technician on the instrument. And there's so many people that I grew up listening to that I will never be able to match, nor should anybody ever aspire to match a Charlie Parker or John Coltrane or Sonny Rollins or Sonny Stitt, or I mean, you can go on and on and on. David Sanborn, Grover Washington Jr., the icons of the instrument that have constantly pushed it to new boundaries. What I feel is my strength is I like writing songs and I like delivering melodies. That's where I feel like if if I were to start all over again from scratch, I'd probably still do the same thing because that's where my heart is writing songs that are accessible, that people feel. And to be able to be this far into a career and kind of keep that consistent thread. I've done a lot of different things, but the consistency, it has been melody. I would say if there's one thing that's been through everything that I've done, it's a commitment to melody. And I hope, I can't imagine, but I hope that will never go out of style for people. That melody, especially if you're an instrumentalist, you're not singing.
Yeah.
So you have to put the emotion through this piece of metal. It's like you're a plumber, you know? And you got to put enough emotion in that melody for people to feel something without the benefit of having a lyric to grab a hold of. That's not easy to do that.
When you play, it almost sounds like the lyric is there because you really are speaking from your melodies and it really is clear. And the listener can almost kind of feel lyrics that relate to them through your melodies as you're playing. It really is a very unique sound that you have. And you do something which the younger generation really has to understand. You do Dave KOZ.
Mm-hmm.
That's who you do. You really have found your own thing and you have stayed true to it. And that's something which is really hard to do.
That's a very nice thing to say.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Because that's what I would imagine that most artists, most musicians aspire to be able to like have something that's very identifiable. Now you have to remember, Dom, that I got pretty freaking lucky. I was really, really lucky with the timing of how this all started. And I look at younger artists today and I love talking to younger artists and love helping younger artists navigate through this time, even though I'm quite sure that I learn more from them than they learn from me. But I think that the timing of when I started, which was kind of like a parallel track to the ubiquitous nature of smooth jazz radio. Like I started releasing records, and then it just was this same time that radio stations all across the United States and around the world really were starting to play this instrumental, kind of pop instrumental music. And so I kind of came up with the advent of smooth jazz radio, and all of a sudden I started to get airplay and started to be able to travel around to do radio station events and get fans all over the country. And so that was really, really lucky. If I started any later or started any earlier, I'm not sure if the same thing would happen. So now that is gone. There are a handful of smooth jazz, for lack of a better term, radio stations. There's one on Sirius XM that is kind of like the American smooth jazz radio station because it's heard all over North America. You can't really rely on radio anymore to generate a lasting career. You have to really be putting on different hats. And with the advent of the internet and social media, this is a completely new thing. I feel like there should be a 4-year university course just to get your handle on social media and how to use technology to propel a career. The only problem with that is that by year 2 of a 4-year course, everything's changed.
Well, that is so true. How has it changed? I mean, like, listen, the industry has changed dramatically, from where we started, where we came from. How have you adapted to that? How have you, I mean, we have to stay open-minded to accept this change that's happening and kind of, glide with it and also push it a little.
I remember when social media came on the scene and I sort of, I just was like, I don't know, what? Are people going to really care about me posting about blah blah blah. I didn't think so. I thought it was going to be short lived. I was very wrong about that. And I've become somewhat of a student. I've really enjoyed being on tour with people who really do know what they're doing. We did a Summer Horns tour, a couple years of it, with a young trombone player named Aubrey Logan, who's an amazing talent, singer and trombonist. Her ability to utilize social media. I mean, I just sat in the bus and looked at her and I said, okay, what are you doing now? And what are you doing now? And what are you doing now? Working with Corey Wong, who I'm not sure if you know of, is a really incredibly talented guitar player, funk guitar player from Minnesota. We made an album together two falls ago, called The Golden Hour. It came out last year. That was also an album that was made in under the COVID umbrella, but we actually did that one in person in Minnesota with a 10-piece band, masked between takes, and it was also filmed at the same time, like the kids do, where you're getting a take, but you're also being recorded for the video at the same time. So the amount of pressure that's on you for that situation. But those kids, those younger musicians, are used to that. They're used to capturing it all and capturing it live. And there's that sense of urgency and excitement that happens when you're not overdubbing and you have to play the melody, and you don't want to be the one that causes everybody to do another take. So I hadn't used that tool in the tool shed in a very, very long time. So that really helped. And then being able to tap into his knowledge of how to put this music out using social media was also incredibly educational for me. So I think for me, it's just about tapping into people that know a lot more about it than I do and having a good team around me. I had this really interesting talk with Kenny G for my radio show, because Kenny's all over the place these days with a new tour and a documentary about him on HBO and album and the whole thing. And he's been a good friend and a good mentor to me for a long time. And here it was on Zoom, just he and I asked the same questions that you're asking of me, of him. Like, how are you doing it? And he said, I'm surrounded by young people. I am constantly surrounded by young people who are pitching me things to do. And I'm like, no way I'm going to do that. And then I end up doing them. No way, I'm not going to do that. And then it happens. And what has resulted is that he's having a career resurgence. He's the most popular instrumentalist of all time, and now showing up with Kanye West or with The Weeknd or with Katy Perry or Super Bowl ads. I mean, the guy knows how to do it. And I'm learning from him too.
Well, it's amazing. You mentioned about your tools. I have a feeling that not only is your tool chest have a variety of tons of tools, but they're real sharp and ready to use. So you seem to have a way of being able to keep yourself at that point of readiness, which is kind of like the business side. So let's talk about that for a second. The business side. How do you organize all this here? How do you manage all of what you're doing?
Well, it's really about the right people showing up. And I've been very lucky to attract really like-minded and wonderful and talented and hardworking people to manage the areas of my life that are the threads that or the spokes of the wheel. Excuse me. In the center is me, and I have an amazing right-hand person, an assistant, but it's demeans her to call her my assistant. She runs the show for me and keeps me on the track. Her name is Janice. Then I have a manager and an agent that I've been working with for over 25 years. And I have a cruise team that really, we've just worked together to create something very, very special with our cruises over the last 15 years. There's a radio team that really I've worked with for also over 25 years. There's a social media guy that's been on my team for 10 years. I think everybody understands, at least under the banner of Dave KOZ, it's funny to say that, but the people that are working under that umbrella really understand me and operate it's not like I have to micromanage it either. I couldn't manage it, Dom, and do what I need to do too. So I focus on the things that I focus on, and I come in and I help direct and helped create a sense for what it is and a brand identity, if you will, or a thread that runs through everything. When the public sees my name, I want people to feel something. I want them to feel like there's a comfort there, that there's a commitment to excellence. Whatever it is that they're seeing it involved with, whether it's a show or a cruise or a radio show or social media post, I want there to be a consistent through line. And I've been able to do that by really working with like-minded professionals that are really committed as well.
Well, it seems like you do that even with the wide variety of artists that you have played with. You know, Foo Fighters, U2, you know, Natalie Cole. I mean, you've got such this Gloria Estefan. You've got such this wide span of artists that you've reached, that you really have kept your sound consistent even within all those different styles.
Well, that's good.
It really is.
Excuse me. The Foo Fighters are a funny thing. I love that you mentioned that. That's just a really special thing. A lot of people, some people know this, but Dave Grohl happens to be my godson,
Oh,
all people. And I love that guy so much. And how he became my godson is a very funny story, and maybe for another time. But
yeah.
it's not like I'm that much older than him. I think I might have 6 or 7 years on him. But through a friend of a friend, it was just a funny scenario. But he did become my godson, and we've been in each other's lives for a long time. And I've learned so much from that guy. I love watching him. I love the moves that he makes. He's endlessly creative, and he's endlessly kind. And he would have, I've seen it so many times, he would have this incredible conversation with the Dalai Lama, and he'll take the same amount of time talking to the car park attendant. That that's who he is. He's just interested and curious about people. And I've looked at him and really borrowed it. I mean, the music I make and the music the Foo Fighters makes, that's pretty different, pretty disparate. But we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
And there's actually they're on a big tour this summer. I've taken the summer off from my normal touring schedule to try some new things. So I'm going to do a group of dates with Corey Wong and his band in Europe in July. And I'm talking about joining the Foos for a little run in August, which would be just amazing. And let me just say this, as not a non-rock musician, when you get on stage with that band, you can have the biggest audience in the world, for jazz and stuff. And it's great. Don't get me wrong. It's great. I love it. But you get on the stage with the Foo Fighters, that is like getting into the fastest sports car ever made and having the thrill ride of your life. It's like nothing else. And I want more of it.
Talk about being a radio host. Talk about how that started, how that came about, because you do that so well in your interviews, how well you speak, the questions you ask. How'd that all come about?
Well, it's like a lot of things in my life. It seems to be a recurring theme, which is other people saying, "Try this, try that." You never know until you try. And I had a friend that was in the radio business that he was a radio programmer, and then he started working with this entertainment company that was doing weekend shows, like specialty programming weekend shows. And he said, I have this idea to create a network that's not based with radio show hosts, that's based on artists in those formats hosting their own show. And I'm like, great. I can't wait to be on one of those shows. And he said, no, I want you to host a 2-hour weekend show. And I'm like, well, I've never done that before in my entire life. And he said, great, that's why we want you. And I remember the first time we were in the studio and I was preparing to, read my script and everything. And I put what I thought was the radio voice on and read it like that, and he says, cut. That's not going to work. I said, well, what do you want me to do? He said, just forget the script, throw it out. Just, here's the artist that I want you to introduce, and just talk from your own perspective. So I could try and do that. That's how the initial stages of that started in 1994 as a show called Personal Notes with Dave KOZ. And then that morphed into the Dave KOZ radio show about 2 years after that. And that has been on the air uninterrupted since 1994. So we're almost to 30 years of a syndicated radio show, which I don't know. I don't know how that happens, but it's still happening. And I did, that same guy went to work for a station in Los Angeles, and he said, I think you should do the morning show. We're going to revamp the station. And I was like, you're absolutely out of your mind. He said, try it. Let's try it. And I pulled in my friend, who was my favorite radio show host in all of the United States, an incredible woman named Pat Prescott from CD 101.9. That's where I knew her from in New York City. I said, Pat, there's this opportunity to host the morning show in Los Angeles. Will you come out and meet the people? And if you like everybody and you like California, maybe you'll think about taking this job with me. And she came out, I think it was in January of a particularly cold year. She left New York, came to Los Angeles for the weekend. It was a gorgeous weekend in January. And she said, where do I sign? And we did that for about 6 years. We hosted the morning show in Los Angeles for 6 years. Obviously, for a musician, that's not an easy thing to do for a long time. I left. Brian McKnight took my place, and they did that for another 4 years. And Pat is still the morning show host at The Wave. Yeah. And somewhere along the way, I did an afternoon show, a syndicated afternoon show, and then when that ended, I started working with SiriusXM Watercolors, and I host a 2-hour show on the weekends for Watercolors, which is called the Dave KOZ Lounge, and we've been doing that for about 5 years. So,
which is a great show. It's just absolutely great.
Well, thank you. I love, it's one of those things I never thought I would be doing that, but here I am so many years later still doing it. And there's one reason why. It's because I love being a champion for the artists and a champion for this music, which is not, instrumental music doesn't get the big exposure that other forms of music get. And so this is my chance to really do whatever I can in my little nook to celebrate these artists that deserve a lot of attention and deserve a lot of cheerleading. So that's how it happens.
Just so you know, that nook is not so little. You're reaching a lot of people, you're influencing a lot of people, and you're inspiring millions in the course of this journey. So that nook has expanded to a whole, it's a village by now. No idea what it is.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for that.
Talk about the Starlight Children Foundation.
Well, Starlight is an organization that I got involved with also a very long time ago. My brother and I, there was a period of time for about 10 years where the theme that we created for a show was on as the theme for a long-running soap opera called General Hospital. Mm-hmm. And that came about because for my first album, there was a song that the music director loved for whatever reason. I started playing it whenever these two characters who were on every day, whenever they were on the screen together, he would play my song. And next thing I knew, I was on the show playing that song for some sort of anniversary for these two characters. I met the executive producer, and they were revamping their show theme and their opening, and she said to me, do you want to have a crack at this? And I was like, are you kidding me? So my brother and I wrote a new theme for General Hospital that was on the air. And there was a party, and I met a woman named Emma Sams, who was an actress on the show. And at this party, she said, I'd love for you to come and play for the Starlight kids. And I was like, well, what is Starlight? She said, well, it's an organization I started with my cousin that helps kids that are in the hospital for a long period of time. Cancer, leukemia, burn victims. These are kids that just want to be kids and can't be. And we do special programs and create these special rooms and all kinds of different things for the kids. I was like, here's my phone number. Call me anytime. Well, And that was not a Hollywood thing. I really meant it, but I didn't think that she would call the next morning. she, she called the next morning. She said, "There's an event this Friday at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. Will you bring your sax and come and play for the kids?" And I was like, "Of course I will." And that's how that happened, because once I saw the courage and the fighting spirit of these young people who were facing very significant odds, just to remain a kid, just to remain alive, and the parents around them. It's just these worlds that exist, but when you're forced to see it in front of you, you really can feel it. And I just got hooked that day, and that was the beginning of my relationship with Starlight. And I started to work with them very closely on programming and raising money for them and raising awareness, and became one of their ambassadors. And that was a long time ago, and I'm proud to say through the various efforts that we do, primarily on our cruise where we have a silent auction for Starlight, we have raised probably close to, I know it's well over $1 million for Starlight now through the generosity of our fans. So it's really, really great. And they continue to inspire, because sadly, there's always going to be sick kids, and we can learn a lot from them. And I know I have.
Well, it's the humanitarian part of you doing this is just so beautiful, that you are so involved deeply in these emotional, it's like an emotional tug of war when you're there trying to keep your own self balanced while you're experiencing this here. That's a pretty huge commitment that you've made.
Yeah, I always feel like I get more out of it than I put into it. And I would imagine that when you talk to artists that are involved in some sort of philanthropic endeavor, that they would probably say the same thing. That the amount of time put in is eclipsed by what the reward is when you get back. Whatever it is that you're involved with. One of my main mentors in life is someone who continually shows me how to do that, and that's Herb Alpert. Herb is probably, I don't know his exact age, but he's probably pushing 90 now. And he and his wife, Lonnie Hall, are, I think, I read this a while ago and I'm not surprised. I think they're only second to Oprah in individual gift giving philanthropic work in the United States of America. Every single year, tens of millions of dollars is donated from the Herb Alpert Foundation, and primarily to music causes. He's very, very involved in music education, and has made a big gift to the UCLA School of Music and also the USC School of Music. And what that particular foundation does is really goes into hard hit areas of the United States, and funds music programs and arts programs, because that's really how people learn how to be human beings, I feel, is through arts education. And that's not something that you see very often in public schools these days. And so I've really used Herb as my weather vane of how to be in the world. Of course, I don't have the tens of millions of dollars that he has, but in my tens of dollars, I can do that.
Well, for sure, your weather vane is facing north. It's doing so much good, and as we all do it, if we cannot change the world, at least we can bend it a little. You're bending it tremendously for sure in the process. We have many younger generations of inspired musicians that listen to this and what we do. In closing, what would you say to this next generation that would just give them a little bit of preparation and advice that can prepare them for having a future in this crazy business?
Well, I would say, firstly, that the world needs you, and you're going to get a lot of roadblocks and a lot of speed bumps, and you're going to get moments where you want to pull your hair out and say, how can I figure this out? And why is this not happening for me? But the world needs you, maybe more now than ever. If you look at all the things that we are fighting against. As we're doing this interview, there's a war that's raging right now in the Ukraine. I mean, it's like we have not really, as human beings, learned the lessons of our past. We continue to make the same mistakes. look at climate change. I mean, it's just, there's one thing after the other, these monumental issues that are facing the human race right now. What can we do as individuals, as artists? You know, this is a daunting task, right? And I don't mean to be all heavy about this stuff but it is a pretty heavy time. Just being totally honest and being very transparent. Arts, whatever kind, whether it be music or fine arts or painting or sculpture or theater, whatever it is that is your particular bent, make your art. Because art, I believe, is the antidote to creating more calm, more love, more light in the world, because that's what art is. And even though there will be all those things where the naysayers and people say no, and those days where you just want to crawl back into your bed and pull the covers over your head, fight that urge. Maybe stay under the covers a little bit, but then fight that urge and pick yourself up and continue to create your art, because you may not feel it, but you're actually putting love into the world, but just by making your own art. And even if 3 people listen to it and you can enlighten and lift the burdens of 3 people, then you're doing your job. So create, and continue at all costs, because the world needs you.
Absolutely beautiful, Dave. You continue to produce a positive, healthy medicine that is lifting people, that is inspiring people, that is bending this world to a much healthier place. For that, I thank you so much. And thank you so much for the Artist Series, Dave. You have been absolutely fantastic. I look forward at some point to coming out to hear you play live and touching base with you for sure in the future.
I look forward to it, Dom. Thank you so much for having me on this show and for all the work that you're doing to do just what I just mentioned about creating light in the world, because that's what we all need, and people like yourself are doing that on a daily basis. And I am absolutely appreciative and greatly honored to be a part of it. So thank you.
David, thank you so much. Stay well and healthy.
You too.
Dom Famularo here, the Sessions panel. This is so exciting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click the subscribe button to be a part of what we're doing. The views help us tremendously. All of your comments, we read them and react to them. This is incredible. The support you're giving us is great. The Sessions panel, we'll see you real soon.